Welcome, friends,
to the How To Heretic.
I'm Uncle Mark.
And I'm Uncle Dan.
And I'm Uncle Doug.
And this is your user's guide to life on the inside.
That's wrong. Hey, leaving religion is the first step into a larger, better world.
But it can also be a scary world. Things work differently now.
Never fear, that's why we're here.
We're your audio uncles. And with help from good friends and experts in all sorts of fields,
we're going to share the stories and seek the knowledge to build a great life.
After all, you only get the one that we know of, so you better make the most of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, co-uncles.
Hello.
Choo-hoo.
And hello, all the nibblings out there. Did you know I think a couple of people have told me this. Do you know that is plural for nieces and nephews?
Nibblings?
Nibblings.
Oh, I had no idea.
I've always called them nephews.
Nephews. I think that nibblings is adorable.
I love it.
I like nibblings.
Yeah. So hi, nibblings, all out there in the world. Hope you're doing well.
I hope it turns out not to have some racist connotation.
It probably will. It's an American word. So what a show this week. Episode 146. It is crazy. I'm going to talk about a pre-Columbian Ringo Starr project.
And then I'm going to talk about a self-help book from the 1950s that's still fucking up our world today.
Dianetics, yes.
And I am just going to bang my head against a wall for a long time and hope that something good can come of it.
And if whatever blood comes out of his ears, he'll donate to the Red Cross. And so, little announcement. Some of you may have noticed that I tweeted something yesterday about setting my mother's vagina on fire, and it's a true story. And if you want to hear it, you got to become a patron because it's behind the patron paywall.
Ha-ha!
You can do it, and it's a good story. Well, it's a terrible story. But everybody's okay, but nobody is.
And whatever you're thinking it is, you're wrong.
Yes. So,
but also, but only because you think that when he says those words, I set my mother's vagina on fire, it couldn't possibly be what he's actually saying.
Yeah, it's what I actually did. So it's okay. We all made it through. I was a kid. But, throw some money in the kitty and you can hear all about that. And, all the usual stuff's going on. We got the merch. You can go to the Heretique. We got the YouTube channel where all the segments are stacking up. We have the Facebook page. Well, it's the unofficial Facebook page. We don't have it, but our friend Joe Waldhair set it up. You can go there. And we're blowing up in the media, guys.
Oh, we are we're on fire.
We're on fire, and our next stop is Mount Rushmore. It's going to be terrific. We hope to see you there, and let's do a show.
Here we go.
Charge!
Uncle Dan.
Yes.
This is a season of celebration.
It is?
It is. It's not just...
It doesn't feel like one.
It certainly doesn't, but it is, goddammit.
Very much, it feels not... I haven't felt like celebrating at all.
Yeah, and at least on the calendar, it's a season of celebration. And for all you poor folks in the other 49 stupid states, you're done. Your celebration's over, but ours is just beginning here in Utah. Mm-hmm. We have the Mormon Independence Day coming up on the 24th. Yeah. So why don't we pick on them?
Yeah. Hey, Uncle Mark, what's long and hard and full of semen?
Well, I don't know why you're bringing that up because I'm going to talk about boats.
Okay, fine.
So, guys, if there's one thing people have come to rely on us for, it's straight talk about boats. You know what I mean?
Yacht talk.
Old dead gods are cool, and who doesn't like to check the big board of cult body counts every week? But it's boat talk that keeps the Patreon cash rolling in like a green tide under a big wooden boat. Well, if you're like Chris Angel Mindfreak and you exclusively tune in for our blue ribbon boat banter, today is your lucky day. Boats, we got them. So today's boat, or rather boats, are of a very special class indeed, fellas. Boats plural because there's 8 of them, and special class because they have no propulsion, no keels, or rudders, or windows. They got a pluggable hole in the top and the bottom, and while technically called barges, are designed to function even when fully submerged, making them not barges at all, but submarines. Is this the best boat bait ever, you guys?
It's a Nimitz class, I think.
It is a Nimitz class. Yeah, I think it's a November class.
It's a Nimrod class.
Oh, good, Doug.
Thank
Doug
you.
knows where I'm going. So paddle with me back to the 1830s, guys. Where a weird kid that would later go on to get his ass shot out of a window for marrying and raping other men's wives and daughters decided to write a book. But rather than put pen to paper, he put rock to hat and yelled at his dumb friend behind a curtain the contents of some ancient Mayan gold plates he'd found out past the fence of his family's farm near Niagara Falls, which no one else ever actually saw. The gold plates, I mean, not Niagara Falls. Those were in Superman 2. Everybody saw those. So the book he wrote is a bone-crushingly boring saga of a bunch of Middle Eastern Jews building a big old boat and ditching Jerusalem sometime around 600 BCE, sailing to the unpeopled Americas 900 years before Columbus, then splitting into warring factions of good white Jews and bad brown ones, having battles with more casualties than the biggest battles of World War II, blah, blah, blah. That's why indigenous Americans exist. All it makes is sense. But that big old boat is not the one on deck today. So at the end of this blathering story without any real point or moral called the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith dashed out a bizarre additional chapter called the Book of Ether that definitely feels extremely rushed for some reason. Doug, you've read it.
I have.
Yeah, and it's very weird.
It's basically almost basically a retelling of the Book of Mormon with different characters and really, really fast.
Yeah, so, compared to the rest of the Book of Mormon, it's lightning speed. So
I do like. I do want to quickly interject that I think it's delightful. So Mark Twain said that the Book of Mormon was chloroform in print.
Yeah,
and then Christopher Hitchens accused him of hitting too close to the mark, considering it does have a book called Ether. I just wanted to
exactly right. So, Doug, you thought that maybe the Book of Ether was written right at the end because some contemporary archaeological find was much older than the narrative of the family of Nephi colonizing the Americas in 600 BCE. So Joseph Smith had to quickly have an answer for that. I couldn't find anything to support that. And I even
heard that once, and I don't remember where. And I've sent out some feelers as well. But, the beginning of the Book of Mormon is 600 BCE, which is obviously much, much too recent. Yeah. And I had heard that when Joseph Smith was near finishing the Book of Mormon, they had discovered something that predated that, so he needed to find a way to kind of move the starting date.
Well, we couldn't find anything to corroborate that.
No, so I couldn't either.
You go into the boat banter brig with all the spiders, Uncle Doug. So, old make it up as you go Joe dashed out the Book of Ether, which is mercifully short, but for some fucking reason, as Doug mentioned, is just a highly abridged duplicate story of the Book of Mormon, but set 1,600 years before it. So, in this book, the central character is a guy called Jared, but no, he isn't. The central character is Jared's brother, who, though he is referred to dozens of times and is literally the protagonist, never gets a name other than brother of Jared, which is kind of a hoot because Joseph Smith was just a whiz at making up names. So I don't know why he didn't just call him Anti-Ho Jared Ha Zohar Ha and call it a day. Fuck no.
Well, wait, what his name is, right?
Well, but that's not canonical. What it kind of is, but it came after he wrote the book.
It came after he wrote the book, but he did come up with a name every bit as ridiculous as what you just said.
Would you like to tell the folks at home what it is, Dan?
I would like to do that. His name was Mahanrai Moriankamer.
That is the stupidest thing anyone has ever said in the world.
This is true.
Wish I had. And what's delightful is I didn't have to make that up. That's just what.
Yeah, Joseph Smith didn't put it in the story in their canonical book. Some guy asked him to bless his son like years later, right?
Yeah. Right.
And he blessed his baby, and he said, "Oh, will you give him a name?" And he said, "Yes, little Mahanrai Moriankamer." And they were like, "Brr." And he said, "Oh yeah, that's the real name of the brother of Jared. I just didn't make it into the first draft."
You got to give it to him. That is literally the world's first encrypted password.
Yeah, it is also a genital wart. So
yeah,
you got to get your Mahanrai Moriankamers looked at. So
you just get some Nephite cream and it clears it right up.
Mahanrai Moriankamer, I hardly know her.
So, in the Book of Ether, Jared and brother of Jared are chilling in the shadow of the biblical Tower of Babel when the great confounding happens. Jared and brother of Jared don't want to have to learn a second language. They were totally destined to become Americans. So they ask the Lord what to do, and he says, go chill in the valley of Nimrod. Sure. Now, according to Mormon, and you cannot see these massive air quotes my fingers are making, archaeology, there is some disagreement on where the made-up the Valley of Nimrod is. Some websites say the Mesopotamian River Valley. Okay, fine. And others say somewhere, including Hugh Nibley, say somewhere north of Yerevan, Armenia, and south of Tbilisi, Georgia, in the Caucasus Mountains.
Hugh Nibley, by the way, it bears mentioning, for those who don't, Hugh Nibley is a Mormon intellectual, same air quotes.
Yeah, he's kind of the original apologist. So,
Yeah.
so
But I
there-
mean, you can't take him even if you wanted to take him seriously. His name is Hugh Nibley. You can't.
yeah, Nibley. So
Hugh Nibley. Yeah.
there in the arid, rocky valleys, the Lard directed brother of Jared and his brother Jared to, wait for it, build barges in the Armenian mountains.
Right.
And in these, quote, large barges, they transported much livestock and fowl, and swarms of bees, and even somehow loads of live fish. And they sailed these large barges in the Valley of Nimrod, which the Nimrods at Mormon apologist sites claim, and I cannot stress this enough, is in the barren highlands of the Caucasus Mountains of Armenia.
Well,
I've been
they
to
had
the
to be
mountains
for
north
these
of
guys
Yerevan.
to be Caucasians.
Maybe that's it.
Well,
So I've been to the mountains north of Yerevan, Armenia, and they are spectacularly gorgeous, but I could best describe them as dry. And also mountains. Now, there are some smallish rivers and a lake that's nothing to sneeze at, but nothing large barges could possibly navigate. A huge wooden structure full of animals in the mountains is, Brother Joseph, not called a barge, but rather a barn. Words. How the
hey,
fuck do they work?
isn't Large Barge the person who gave Pee Wee Herman a ride?
That's right. She took him to the promised land.
Yep.
So, weirdly, there is almost no point to this part of the story except to create precedent for the real whale of a tale that comes next. So, after 4 years of good, clean barge living in the Rocky Highlands, the Lord commands Jared and his brother to strike out on an adventure more suited to boats and barges of all sorts, an ocean voyage with water rather than mountains to the promised land, that is the Americas, that the people in the first chapters of the Book of Mormon already did 1,600 years later. What the fuck is up with this timeline?
So it bears mentioning, because I think a lot of even ex-Mormons forget about this first part, Mark, that what we're about to get to, everybody remembers, but that they built barges and like pushed them through the fucking mountains.
huge barges full of, basically, it was, I think it's an attempt to crib Noah's Ark,
Right.
but they're full of animals.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Guys, it's called a portage. It's totally doable. I don't know. You just,
A sledge.
yeah.
So he commands them to build 8 barges, and the word in the book is barge. We'll come back to that. For some reason, and they are smaller than the marooned mountain barges, because why be stupid halfway when you can do it all the way? So this is where the narrative gets just a little fucking silly, starting right here. So,
Oh, now?
Yep, right
now
here.
it gets silly? Okay.
Well, there, it already started. So this 8-pack of barges were built by the command of, and to the exact specifications of, Jesus H. Christ himself, the Son of God and co-creator of the universe, including all its physics, and yea, verily, even the waters the 8 barges must float upon.
Hey, he was a carpenter.
Well, let's see just how well Jesus Christ does as a marine architect and carpenter. First, like I said, they are to be smaller than the barns in the mountains. Of course, if you're about to spend a year at sea, you aren't going to need too much cargo space, as I will shortly demonstrate. Then the Lord directs them to make them, quote, like unto the lightness of a fowl upon the water. So far, so good.
Meaning it can float?
Meaning it should mostly float.
Okay.
So, ironically, throughout Joseph Smith's numbing blizzard of high word count writing, he's always very light on detail. Like the Liahona, the useless magic 8-ball we discussed in episode 110.
Right.
He would shrug off the hard work of detailed descriptions by saying it was, quote, of curious workmanship. The barge version of us of curious workmanship, deployed multiple times here, is that being, quote, tight like unto a dish. The sides were tight like unto a dish. The top was tight like unto a dish. The bottom was tight. Okay, fucking get it, Joseph. You hack. You couldn't
But we
describe
don't get it. What does that mean?
But he couldn't describe a boat, but he knew what a dish looked like because he ate his stewed opossum off one every night. This is the Mormon prophetic version of saying "I love lamp." Fucking lazy goddamn writer.
But he did. You're right. He knew what a dish looked like. I just don't get how it's tight.
Right.
In what way is a dish tight?
Yeah.
And how does that apply?
A dish
to
is
boat building?
an object comprised of a single material completely.
Yeah.
It is not many strips of ceramic kind of fused together like a ship.
Pulled taut over itself in some sort of way.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've established the leak-proof Corningware bona fides of your little barges. You're good to go, I guess Jesus said. But then not Jared, but his brother, who is obviously smarter than Jesus, knower of all things, said, hey, hold on a tick. There is literally no way in or out of these pontoons. Also, no light or air inside. How do we even steer these water coffins?
Lancelot, Galahad, and I get into the boat.
Exactly. And so they got to the point where they had built these things and they're standing on top of them with their stupid wooden hammers going, oh, shit. Wait,
How do we get in?
Exactly. So Jesus, who had apparently not thought of these things, was like, oh, shit, right. Yeah, just make a little hole in the top and then in the bottom, too, master shipbuilding right there, and make some kind of a cork. So when you need some air, pull out the cork. And before you go to battle stations, just jam it back in, okay? We good? You guys? Guy who's smarter than me, Jesus Christ, but doesn't merit his own name.
Doesn't that make that tight like unto a colander?
Exact, tight like unto a gravy boat.
Unto a slotted spoon.
So you will notice he did not say a fucking word about steering them, nor will he. So we joke all the time about these being 4,220-year-old pre-Columbian wooden submarines built by nomadic desert Jews. Mormon apologists run all the way up to their poop decks in a huff about this, furiously saying the word in the Book of Mormon is barges. And they are absolutely correct. A barge is a surface craft that carries goods, etc. But these 8 barges were designed by Jesus to, yes, float on the surface, but as the narrative makes clear several times in passages like this one, Ether chapter 6, verse 7, they also go underwater. Quote, and it came to pass, classic start, that when they were buried in the deep, there was no water that could hurt them, their vessels being tight like unto a dish, and also they were tight like unto the ark of Noah. Therefore, when they were encompassed about by many waters, they did cry unto the Lord, and he did bring them forth again upon the top of the waters. They were underwater. Mm-hmm. Two things.
In their wooden boat.
In their wooden boat. In their barge. 2 things. Citing Noah here does not help. As it has been conclusively proven, the Noah story in Genesis is fucking absurd. It didn't happen. And in any case, it was a story stolen from the much older fable of Utnapishtim and Gilgamesh, as we discussed in episode 53, which in turn was likely synthesized from the older Mesopotamian flood narrative of Ziusudra, as discussed in episode 133. Citing those old fables... By the way,
sorry, I hate to interject, but can I just say that Utnapishtim is actually, I believe, Aramaic for Mahanrai Mori Ankamer.
I think, by God, you're onto something here, Hugh. So anyway, citing those old fables gives you no help, Joe. But a barge that goes totally underwater sinks. Barges go on top of the water, not under it, and if they do, it's just the one time, and then you need the new barge. Right. A boat that can float on the surface and also can survive being totally submersed is called a fucking submarine. I'm not wrong to call them submarines. Joseph was wrong to call them barges. Submarines. They're definitionally submarines. Like early German U-boats, they spent most of their time on the surface and then would dive for short times for attack or hiding. And all the air that was in there when you pounded the cork back or closed the actually watertight steel hatch was all you had. But even primitive German subs had propulsion, they had steering, they had internal lighting, semi-modern food and water storage, and a way to, if not pleasantly, but at least manage feces and urine. Mm-hmm. Jared's brother had none of those. Well, one. Remember when the guy who was related to Jared by birth but wasn't deemed important enough to have a name asked Jesus about lighting? One funny aside before I get to what happened. He asked what should they do for windows, saying, "For behold, ye cannot have windows, for they will be dashed in pieces." Fair point, smart sibling of useless minor character who has a name. It seems here he's referring to the futility of plate glass windows in submarines, in which case he is both correct and a time traveler.
Right.
Since the first evidence of plate glass used in building window openings is from Roman Alexandria 2,300 years after this story allegedly took place.
Totally. Yeah.
There were no plate glass windows. But how was Joseph to know such trivia in time to hit print on his totally true Third Testament of the totally true Bible? But again, Jesus didn't come up with the workaround for the light issue. Brother of Jared did, when he, quote, moltened some glass marbles out of a mountain and asked Jesus to touch them and make them glow, which he obligingly did, in the process of which Jared's brother saw Jesus' finger and apparently came in his pants. It doesn't matter. This is a submarine story. You can go read all the other bits if you want, but seriously, why would you? So, the boats had no oars or sails. Even though Joseph Smith knew these were ancient forms of seafaring, see the story of Nephi written earlier, but happening later in the same train wreck of a book. These barges would just driftwood the whole length of the Mediterranean, through the Straits of Gibraltar, and then across the violent Atlantic to Central America. As I said, they had no keel or rudder, so they were not only totally unsteerable, they would just roll around in the tide.
Oh, my God.
Capsizing and uncapsizing at random. Thus the hole in the bottom of the tight like a dish boat, so they could open that for an occasional breath whence they were upside down. Now, I don't...
Yeah, it's basically you're on the spin cycle for the entire time that you're floating in the... Now, you said... I do have to call you on something. You said that there was no way to handle feces and urine, but how do you think you use that hole? It's just for air?
Well, we'll get to it. So now I don't know everything about boats. I don't know everything about boats, you guys, but I obviously know more than both Joseph Smith and Jesus. An airless wooden boat drifting aimlessly in the Atlantic, rolling over like a fucking rock tumbler at random, full of people, farm animals, mounds of feed and poo, and giant earthenware jugs and jars of fresh water and liquid is insane. Imagine the putrid, carcassy death ooze that would trickle out of these unsurvivable murder barrels when they finally hit a reef somewhere. So
just explode.
They would explode. So many problems here. Let us try even to begin to understand this insanity. Later in the text, it tells us that in addition to Jared and his brother, there were 22 other people who made the journey. So 24 people. So that works out to 3 people per submarine. Each person needs 3 to 5 pounds of food a day, so let's average at 4. It was a 344-day trip. Just fucking imagine that locked away in the suffocating darkness. Anyway, added up, that's 4,128 pounds of food for the people in each barge, over 2 tons.
Whew.
An adult person should drink half a gallon of water a day. So let's say old-timey people could live on that in their weird boat. That's about 600 gallons just for drinking, no washing, no cooking. So you have to more than double that to maintain any sort of hygiene. So say you need 1,500 gallons per boat minimum for the people. And that's just for the people. They brought all their livestock with them. Their mountain barges were explicitly about having all the beasts of the field and swarms of bees and the birds of the sky and even fucking fish stock tanks in them. So let's be reasonable and say each of these barges had 2 mating pairs each of cows, sheep, and goats. Just pulling that out of my butt. A bare minimum to maintain a healthy herd in the New World. We won't even bother with chickens, etc., which is, since this is a ripoff of Noah and the Ark, I imagine they would have had tons of fowl as well, but we don't have all day. A low estimate for how much each animal eats per day times 344 days comes out to 48,160 pounds of animal feed.
That's sure.
24 tons in each boat, which is the max capacity of a fully loaded 40-foot tractor trailer. But since dry hay isn't that dense, it would take at least the volume of 2.5 40-foot trailers to store that much food. plus a low guesstimate of 23,516 gallons of water for the animals. To put that in perspective, that would be the same volume of water as in an above-ground backyard pool that is 52 inches deep and 33 feet in diameter, or more than the capacity of 2 full-size diesel truck tanker trailers, right? Just for the hydration for the animals to survive in each boat. That's 200,000 pounds of water in each submarine.
Oh my God!
And what was the staggering supply of water stored in? Some tight like a motherfucking dish wooden tanks, a shit ton of super heavy earthen jugs. A typical earthenware Greek amphora at the time could hold about 5 gallons. And remember, you have to keep this water uncontaminated by the tonnage of urine and shit on the boat, or deadly diseases like dysentery are inevitable. And the only way in and out of these ships was a small hatch in the top or bottom. Can you imagine trying to get amphoras into that, or a cow, without breaking its legs and back? How long did it take to load these tens of tons of provisions into these dark, airless spaces, let alone gather that much sustenance beforehand? Pardon me. So in addition to building 8 weird barges with poor tools and materials and know-how, these 24 people had to grow, harvest, procure, and store 36 semi-truckloads of non-perishable food and fresh water before they even got on the submarines. 36 truckloads, 24 people, in a time when eking out subsistence living with no excess was considered good. And what happens to all that tonnage of food and water once everyone on board has had their meal? And in the case of the cows, a minimum of 5 gallons of water per day to drink. That's right. You live inside something Dante couldn't have dreamed of on his worst day. A spinning, tumbling, 360-degree litter box in near total darkness with livestock, fellow passengers, shattered beehives and swarms of angry bees, hay bales, bushels, and clay jars full of 200,000 pounds of water tumbling through space in all directions, covered in sloppy, urine-saturated feces, wheat stalks, and barley like Satan's own shake and bake. You should totally turn back, but whoops, you can't. There's no steering wheel. It's fucking nightmarish. Again, if a single thing could survive this journey, that's the true miracle.
And what about you? I mean, you didn't even bring up the scurvy, right?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is they couldn't have fire inside, according to the scripture, so they couldn't cook anything. So everything had to be like a prepared meal. Like
that's a lot of roughage.
Yeah. What did they have that could last a year as far as human food?
I mean, the other side of this whole thing is that it even says, I believe in the narrative, like, if you take the cork off the top and water rushes in, just put the cork back because there's no windows. Right. You don't know if you're underwater or not.
Right. Exactly.
And those corks have to open into the thing. Whatever's plugging it has to open in.
Right.
Which means that a little bit of water pressure will be more than enough.
Yes.
To push that thing in.
How many seconds do you have if you're 1,000 feet underwater? Where you open the top hatch and have to push it back in by hand?
Yeah.
Like how long do you have?
And there's only 3 people in each submarine. It's not like you have an army of men to do it, right?
Right, and everything is just lubricated with feces.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Saturated with urine.
Not to mention, I hadn't realized how many of these boats there were. You're 8. Setting these things adrift with literally no navigation, and they all wind up at the same place?
How about that?
That is some good navigation right there.
So we haven't even gotten into the physics of airflow. Maybe the most immediate problem of all. We've established that these small subs have to be fairly huge just to accommodate the bare minimum of space for 3 people and at least 12 medium to large animals and the convoy of provisions required. At least 4.5 tractor trailer loads, and I hadn't figured how many amphoras can fit into a trailer yet, so it's probably more like 10. But just the people would each consume almost 400 cubic feet of air a day. That's the same volume as a big construction dumpster holds per person per day. A cow is double that, a sheep is about the same as us, and goats are a little less. You would need a minimum of 16 15-yard construction dumpsters of fresh air volume per ship per day, needing to occasionally be let in a single small hole, as well as removing the same volume of deadly carbon dioxide and methane through that same hole every day.
Oh my
yeah.
And any good HVAC person will tell you air is like water. To move it through a closed space, you need one way in, another way out, and something to motivate the flow. In a closed, damp space, all that body heat, gas, and exhalation would build up a positive pressure. So opening a single, let's say, 3 foot by 3 foot hole, and the official church illustrations, it looks more like it's 16 by 16 inches. It's tiny. So I'm being overly generous.
Yeah,
that would
because you
release,
can't get a cow through that.
Not a mature one, and certainly not living. That would release heat and gas and moisture, but the positive pressure would prevent any fresh air from coming in, at least until the pressure equalized. And then what would draw in the fresh air? It's a closed room. Maybe if the hatch was off for the entire trip, exterior winds could keep it at a minimal survivability in there, but it's not likely. And remember, they only open the hatch once in a while. Oh, if they open the top hatch and then the bottom one at the same time, it would do nothing to solve their air intake problem. Quite the contrary, they would sink. And while there are 99 more problems, and that's really the final one, fellas, 4,220 years ago, sailing and serious seafaring was in its infancy in the Near East. The people of the South Pacific were eons ahead of everyone in sailing capability, but that's no help here. Reed rafts and primitive dugout canoes were the most common sort of craft in the Mediterranean. The sort of sophisticated barrel-making wood joinery of boats, like the elegant Viking hulls, were 2,000 years away from being developed. And even those sophisticated craft leaked and needed constant maintenance to keep above water. Even if Jared's brother, his brother Jared, and their 22 friends had access to the huge, properly grained timbers like old-growth oaks that dotted Europe and Britain, which they did not, whether they were in Mesopotamia or the Armenian islands, the absurd level of craft and boat riding they would need to have was the result of generations of shipbuilding know-how, not until the era of the great wooden navies of the world. And even those master builders in the 17th and 18th centuries failed at every attempt to make a serviceable wooden submersible, despite many attempts. And the shipwrights of the British, French, and Russian navies, who tried, again, many times to make subs capable of just delivering one single explosive charge in a harbor in calm waters, and they failed every time, they had hardened steel tools, excellent materials, and huge, highly specialized labor forces that a tiny family of early Bronze Age desert nomads could not ever have had access to or ever conceived of. In 4220 BCE, to make 8 giant, fully watertight submarines that could withstand the pressure of being just 20 feet underwater for even a minute, again and again for a 344-day journey, which I believe is a metric year, across some of the roughest seas on Earth is inconceivable. And an actually watertight steel drum will implode at 30 feet down, and a 55-gallon steel drum is too small to be torqued and twisted and racked all day, every day by strong waves and storm forces. But if it was, it's steel, not wood, and it would survive, unlike these huge wooden submarines. And in the pointless book of Ether, all 8 submarines, Dan, as you were saying, somehow powerlessly pontoon their way from landlocked Armenia to, I don't know, fucking Guatemala, a journey of over 12,000 miles, intact and at the same time with everyone inside alive and well. In short, this story did not happen. It could not happen. So to finish, there are so many embarrassing things about Mormonism and being Mormon, but you know, guys, this is up there. This is up there with Moonquakers and Bigfoot and the Dream Mine and the Lesser Osmonds and even Super Del Shanzi. Well, maybe not that, but it's close. Every single true believing Mormon reads this story and is like, yeah, the math, it checks out. And in it, Joseph demonstrates that neither he nor Jesus knows Captain Jack shit about boats. Jared's brother saved Mr. Christ's bacon with the air hole and the glowing rocks. And why? Why is this story? Like, what is the actual purpose of this story? It's so laughably, transparently stupid.
Well, inevitably, in every Bible and Book of Mormon story, when they get pushed far enough into a corner, they hit that big button, their AZ3 button. That's like, it's magic. God did it, right? So, okay,
right.
Why didn't he just, part the fucking Atlantic Ocean and let them walk over?
Or transport them there.
Or transport them via teleporter.
Yeah.
Why did they have to get into this hell pot for a year
It's a meat grinder.
I'm being confronted every day by the stench of my own breath when I put my mask on. Can you imagine the hell that was inside these dishes?
Bees. They had bees. And it just is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever encountered. So that's submarines, guys.
Oh,
and, next, and I'd tell you one quick thing to finish is Hugh Nibley, who we mentioned earlier, who's kind of the granddaddy of Mormon apologetics. I just found this morning when I was Googling around. He said, and I'm not kidding, his apologetic is, well, they didn't go to the Mediterranean. They went overland across Asia and put their boats in by Korea.
Oh,
and then
great.
went across. They went the other way around the world.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. Okay.
Ed, when confronted, he's like, well, there's a lot of lakes in Siberia. It's like, it's not the lakes that are the problem. It's the in between the lakes.
Oh, my God.
There you go, guys. Wow. Next time a Mormon tries to tell you they weren't submarines, you can tell them definitively that they are wrong.
I got to go do some sit-ups. I like to keep my abs tight like a dish.
Well, with that, let's sail away. Well, Uncle Dan.
Hey.
Yeah, these are trying times for a lot of us.
I'm trying.
I'm
very trying.
Not for your Elon's Musks or your Bezos's Steves.
Right.
But for the rest of us who aren't profiting off of all the misery right now, it's tough times. And I just feel like I'm just wondering if there's something out there to help us kind of keep our chins up, Dan.
Well, yeah, something that can keep us going, that can help us remember that Bezos's are Jeff's, not Steve's, things like that.
I wasn't talking about Jeff. I was talking about Steve Bezos,
his brother.
His brother.
This is arch enemy. They're twins.
He's the one who's going to come up with the beer brand.
Yeah,
that's right.
Steve Moriankimer, brother of Bezos.
Yeah. But Uncle Doug, help us. What we need look, it's dark. The world is dark, and our spirits are low. What's going to pull us out? Is there some woo for us?
Jesus
Christ. And the weather the recent weather report is simply tear gas.
Yeah.
Well, uncles, I don't know what made you think that turning to me for optimism was the right call, but you are wrong.
That's how bad it is.
That's how bad it is. As will be demonstrated by my segment and later my heaven, I'm in a place right now. So, as has been our wont on this show, we occasionally attack woo in all its forms and those who peddle it. As we've discussed all too often, woo can sometimes be the methadone to the heroin of religion. However, like methadone, too much woo can itself be dangerous. Of course,
need a prescription. Look, let's just be straight.
That's right.
With people. You need a prescription.
There is the mostly harmless woo of, say, Gwyneth Paltrow and her vagina eggs that we talked about back in episode 43. But there are also forms of woo that can almost only cause harm, like anti-vaxxism or QAnon.
Right.
Today we're going to talk about the latter. This week I want to dig into the woo archives all the way back to 1952 to one of the OG woos, Norman Vincent Peale's seminal self-help book, The Power of Positive Thinking, a guide to mastering the problems of everyday living. Many of you will no doubt recognize the name of that book, even if you've never read it. But for a nearly 70-year-old self-help book, it may be one of the most influential books affecting your life right now, but not in any good ways and not for any good reasons.
And it actually was a massive bestseller, right?
Huge bestseller. Yep, yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah, it was a big seller. Norman Vincent Peale, we'll start with him, was born in 1898 in Bowersville, Ohio. He was raised a Methodist and would go on to earn a degree in sacred theology from Boston University School of Theology and a Doctor of Divinity degree at Syracuse University. These are, of course, about as valuable as my degree in epidemiology from Trump University. Peale became a Methodist minister at 24, and 10 years later the pastor of New York City's Marble Collegiate Church, where he remained until his retirement in 1984. Somewhere on this road, he realized three very important things. Lots of people have money. I want that money. And some people will give it to me if I lie to them. So, he became a prolific author and motivational speaker. The subject he would hit on, and which would be the main theme for the rest of his life, was positive thinking, and how positive thoughts and a positive attitude can lead to health, wealth, and happiness. As we'll discuss, sometimes there can be negative consequences by taking mental health advice from someone with no training in the fields of psychology, psychiatry, or mental health. These negative consequences can only be made worse when taking mental health advice from someone with degrees in sacred theology and divinity.
I want a degree in non-sacred theology.
Right, exactly. I love that.
I want a degree in non-Euclidean theology.
Exactly. Although I am a big proponent of mental health counseling, one should be wary about who they let into their heads, and I think it's a bit of a red flag when someone who wants to give you mental health advice believes that their hero is a 2,000-year-old white Palestinian who kills trees with his mind. Aside from becoming perhaps the most sought-after motivational speaker of his time, Peale was a prolific writer, having published something like 40 books, among them The Positive Power of Jesus, 6 Attributes for Winners, You Can If You Think You Can, The Power of Positive Thinking for Young People, The Amazing Results of Positive Thinking, The Power of the Plus Factor, and The Celestine Prophecy. Most of his works were met with mild success, that is until 1952, when The Power of Positive Thinking hit the presses. As you said, Uncle Mark, this book was a huge success. It shot to number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list, where it remained for 48 weeks.
Wow. Holy shit.
It was on the bestseller list for like 150 weeks, but it was number 1 for 48.
How did The Power of Positive Thinking for Young People do?
I don't know.
That reminds. I think you gave me this, Doug. Didn't you give me the Bill O'Reilly's book for teens?
Oh, I think didn't I get it signed?
Oh, I don't know. I think I'd have to look. I think I still have it here, but I'm sure that was a big seller.
And just to be clear, everyone, it was an ironic gift.
Yeah.
So this thing has sold more than 5 million copies and has been translated into over 40 languages. So before we talk about the book, let's talk about the America it was released into. 1950s America was a very different place than the America of today. We were still high on winning World War II, and tens of thousands of GIs had graduated from college on the GI Bill and were entering the workforce as white-collar workers for the very first time. There was hope and possibility in the air, and it seemed that wealth was within reach if you just wanted it badly enough.
And you were white.
Yes, of course, I'm speaking of white America. Black America was having a very different experience at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It is perhaps
So was woman America.
Truly, yeah. It is perhaps no coincidence that then that Peale was not a fan of the civil rights movement, and that he was fast friends with famous racist shitbags such as Billy Graham, Richard Nixon, and Fred Trump. More on that a little later. Mm-hmm. The Power of Positive Thinking is racially problematic in other ways, which we'll get to. But let's just say that although white America of the 1950s gobbled up this shit, black America wasn't really into the notion that if you just wanted it badly enough, it'll happen.
That's their problem.
Yeah.
They just never really wanted it.
Yeah.
I think your segment on Clive and Bundy proved that.
Truly.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of success this book would have if it were released today. All I can say is that given all the shit going on in the world right now, if someone published a book today called The Power of Positive Thinking, I would personally drive cross-country to punch them in the head. Let's talk about the book itself. Peale claimed that through studying various case histories, he was able to put together a list of instructions to help people achieve a permanent optimistic attitude, and by virtue of that alone, the world could be theirs. Now, let's just state for the record that striving for a positive attitude is not a bad thing. Believing that you have a role in your own fate is not a bad thing. Indeed, we know someone that this book helped because it helped them take control of their life. And if that were all the book advocated, we wouldn't be talking about it today. But its problems are in the conclusions that can be derived from its main points. So let's dig in. He starts off with a list of 10, of course 10, rules for overcoming inadequacy. Ready? Picture yourself succeeding. Okay. Think a positive thought to drown out negative thought. All right. Minimize obstacles. Seems logical.
That for such a short one, he snuck a doozy in there.
I know, right? Do not attempt to copy others. Repeat, quote, if God be for us, who can be against us 10 times every day? Just not in German. Work with a counselor. That sounds nice, but remember that what he's talking about here is a religious counselor. He's talking about clergy. Repeat, quote, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me, 10 times every day. Develop a strong self-respect. Affirm that you are in God's hands. Believe that you receive power from God. So,
you know what? I think there's a lot to that, because wherever Christianity is in the world, there's no poor people.
Truly.
Right.
Yep.
Everybody's a success, and they're happy.
Done and done.
Done and done. It bears mentioning that obviously prayer and scripture reading are everywhere in this book, and nary a page goes by without exhortations to hand your life over to God. The power of prayer is everywhere, along with the belief that God is a source of all power and energy, which you would expect this from a self-help book written by a Christian minister. It just makes where we're going to end up all the stranger. The book goes on to describe how to maintain a positive outlook by, say, not worrying about negative things because they aren't your fault anyway. Sections of it read like 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, with tips on how to bend people to your will, like remember people's names and be effusive with praise. So it's mostly pablum. There are long sections about contemplation and meditation, including the repeating of mantras to drive out negative thoughts and reframe anything into a positive context. According to Peele, most obstacles are mental, which is probably the biggest problem with the book. It follows then that those that are successful are necessarily better than those who suffer. And if you suffer, whether physical ailment or financial instability, guess whose fault that is?
Right.
So, in spite of its incredible popularity, the book met with instant criticism from psychologists. These criticisms broke into 2 main veins. The first is that the constant reframing of the world and repetition of mantras is a mild form of self-hypnosis and can cause all kinds of problems, from becoming delusional to being able to excuse any evil because the victims must have had it coming and not wanted a better life hard enough. The second main criticism of the book is that it's stuffed with anecdotes that can't be verified. Having grown up Mormon, we were assaulted every Sunday by anecdotes that were clearly untrue.
Yeah, right.
In The Power of Positive Thinking, Peele makes his points by telling anecdotes about, among others, quote, a practicing physician, a famous psychologist, a prominent citizen of New York City, a business executive, an alcoholic, and a famous trapeze artist. So, because these anecdotes can't be verified and were almost certainly made up, Peele's assertions cannot be repeated or analyzed, and you just have to take his word for it. As we've said on this show many times, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, so when the evidence is utterly lacking, you can pretty much toss away the claims. There is one other vein of criticism, and it's the theological one. Many religious figures have criticized the book for various religious reasons, but we're not going to talk about that here, because what's the point of listening to 2 snake oil salesmen arguing over which elixir will truly cure the diabetes?
Diabetes.
Peele's book and his lectures made him very popular in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And like I said before, he became friends with some very powerful people. His doctrine was particularly attractive to rich white people, because what it said was that no accident of birth or no structural advantage was responsible for their success. No, sir, that was all them. Right. And yes, this is a proto version of the prosperity gospel. As I said before,
this is the gospel of born at third base.
Truly.
Yeah, right.
As I said before, and I will say again, these beliefs can make one delusional. It is perhaps no coincidence that Peele was a regular at Nixon's White House and spoke to him over the phone frequently during Watergate, when Nixon was descending into his most delusional and self-pitying state. It is perhaps also not a coincidence that real estate mogul and 15-time winner of Father of the Year, Fred Trump, and his wife Mary traveled to Peele's church often to hear his sermons. In a desperate attempt to curry his father's favor that did not work, are you listening, Don Jr.? Donald became a huge fan of Peele as well. Donald Trump went so far as to call him his personal pastor, and Peele even officiated Donald Trump's first wedding. Trump has mentioned this book in interviews and puff pieces very often as one of his most important motivators. So, there's a lot of explanatory power here, even if at its core there are some major contradictions. Clearly, Donald Trump has never read the book, mostly because he hasn't read a book or even a presidential daily briefing. There is so much in Peele's writing that seems to be antithetical to the very character of Donald Trump, particularly all the God stuff. Trump has never prayed or asked a higher power to help him or read the Bible, So in that sense, there seems to be an uncrossable chasm between Peel and Trump. But then there's all the rest of the stuff. In his sermons, Peel often said the following, quote, "Stamp indelibly on your mind the mental picture of yourself succeeding. Hold this picture tenaciously. Never permit it to fade." That is 100% uncut Trump.
Yeah.
Right? My crowd size was record-breaking. I won the popular vote. My poll numbers are incredible. No president has done more than me. Black people like me. There is no coronavirus, and it will go away in the summer anyway. My economy is the best in history, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think Trump ever read the book. He probably read the cover and then maybe paid attention for a couple minutes during one of the sermons. However, his belief that he can will reality into submission is at least undoubtedly influenced by this book.
Mm-hmm.
So Peel died of a stroke in 1993, which, according to Peel, he just didn't believe hard enough in not having. So that's kind of it. This book that, was once popular and now has kind of disappeared is absolutely affecting our day-to-day lives because it is the book that our president believes in most.
Yeah, it seems like if we had a time machine, there was probably just one dinner party in Queens in 1957 that could have just one stick of dynamite and the world would be a different place right now, right?
Truly. So
some of the worst people I don't know how seriously evil Peel was, other than just being kind of a delusional quack, but some of the people that surrounded Trump, like Roy Cohn, just some of the world's worst, most evil people around that man.
And if you are who you associate with, then being fast friends with Richard Nixon, Fred, and Donald Trump certainly says something about your character. Yeah. So if any of our listeners out there with children, if you are considering gifting them a book of hokum that will contribute to their eventual derangement, consider giving them a hug instead. You might save 160,000 lives 65 years from now. So
yeah,
there you
go. Socially distant hug. Yes, kind of like Trump gives his children.
Exactly.
And would give his wife if she would let him.
Do you know he doesn't follow Tiffany on Twitter?
Oh, that's so shitty.
It's just beautiful. It's just perfect.
So she'll be the one killing Americans in 50 years?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the cycle continues. It's the
Yay.
circle of life. All right. Well, thanks, Doug. That makes me feel so much better. I'm just going to keep that in mind and keep a positive view of...
Spirits lifted.
Spirits lifted. So, all right. Well, let's move on.
Fellas...
Yeah.
Hello.
We talk about it every week. The fact that some people who listen to this show are so compelled by it,
enlightened,
that they decide that they need to contribute to the continuation of its making.
And so they have, and it's amazing, and they're neat people, and we need to thank them now. So, thank you so much to Daniel, to Sarah, to Jordan, and, Uncle Doug, I believe you have some words about what's going to happen to Michael Eric.
That's right. And that's one person, Michael Eric.
Yeah.
And like
we assume.
We don't know.
That's true. We don't know.
It could be 10. You don't know.
It could be a whole slew of Michael Erics.
I could get out the e-meter and see how many people are living inside of him.
It could be a murder of Michael Erics. Well, listen, I teased out in my segment that I'm kind of in a place this week, and I think we all are, as we celebrate our national holiday in the worst possible way. So, Michael Eric, I'm sorry in advance. I have bad news for you. This virus, she is not going away. And we are doomed to live out the rest of our lives watching our curve continue to rise and our social media feeds full of angry Karens screaming something vague about freedom while they lick fire hydrants to own the libs. So, it will come as quite a relief when you finally catch the virus and succumb to its fatal power. In that moment, surrounded by nothing but beeping machines, a wave of relief will wash over you. Goodbye, stupid world. Whatever comes next can't be as boneheaded as what you're leaving behind.
Oh, God. I'm fearful.
He gave us money, Doug.
I know. I'm sorry, Michael Eric. I can't stop now.
I'm more sorry, Michael Eric.
It's too late. We're in it. We're in it. Just keep going.
At first, you are surrounded by darkness. Then, like the rising of 1,000 suns, you are bathed in a blinding white light. I mean, a really white light. A powerful white light, you might say. Your eyes struggle to adjust like a newborn baby under hospital lights. Yet, While they do, you feel warmth, like a campfire on a beautiful summer night. A comfort washes into your soul. You've made it. You're in heaven. Well, a heaven. As your eyes ever so slowly become accustomed to your surroundings, you see figures all around you. White figures. Very white figures. They are covered from head to toe in white. Given where you just were, your mind instantly makes a connection. Everyone is wearing face masks and personal protection equipment. Is it a reflection of our dark times that the bar for heaven is so low that people wearing masks and PPE qualify? Sure, but such is the state of our reality. It's not much, but it's not nothing. At least in your heaven there will be no coronavirus, no community spread, no need to flatten the curve, no existential dread that everyone around you and everything you touch could be your doom. That alone is enough to put your mind at ease. However, as your eyes continue to adjust, you start to notice something strange about the figures around you and their PPE. Why is everyone's mask so pointy on the top? And why do they all keep coming up to me and aggressively gesturing to see if I am A-OK? The source of the warmth draws your attention. Huh. It's a big, burning, lowercase t. That's, oh shit. A dreadful realization runs up your spine. Your heaven, it looks a lot like a KKK rally.
Oh, God.
And indeed, it is, Michael Eric. Your heaven is one eternal clan meeting. Why is this happening to you? You lived a good life. You don't deserve this. Well, Michael Eric, what did you expect? God so thoroughly mucked up life. What did you expect him to do with the afterlife? Look on the bright side. Everyone is wearing masks, and they're all wearing PPE. And talk about social distancing. These people practically invented it. You might even say they take it a bit too seriously. And before you ask, why are these fuckers in heaven? Don't worry. An eternity of being angry at people that aren't even here is their punishment. Sucks that you have to be there with them, but them's the breaks. Sorry, Michael Eric.
Holy shit! What a wonderful thing that's happened to you, Michael Eric.
Yeah, well, I think you took one for the team, man. I think you prevented somebody else from that fate, and so good for you.
Yeah, and we will be getting Doug some therapy. Don't worry. It will happen eventually.
New Patreon goal.
I tried.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone who does Zoom therapy sessions for the clinically depressed podcaster, please reach out to Uncle Doug.
And in the meantime, go to the website, hit support us, throw your whole coin jar right at the screen. That's how the money gets in there. And then go to any place that you can do 5 stars. Give us 25, and keep 5 for yourself. Huh?
Yeah, go grab your parents' or your daughter's phone and give us 5 stars on their account.
Yeah,
just they don't have to listen for us to get 5 stars from them.
You don't have to listen to love the show. In fact, I think it's probably easier the other way around. So do that, and we love you, and stay safe out there, and let's move on.
Uncle Mark.
Yeah, hold on, I'm typing. Just
come back.
Fucking burn this guy down, you motherfucker. Yeah, what do you need?
It seems like these days, many of us, our only window into the outside world is literally our windows or the internet.
Yeah. The internets.
And a lot of us are spending a lot of time on the internet, and there's a lot to argue about on that there internet because the world, she's on fire.
Yeah.
This world is on fire.
We didn't start the fire. I mean, it's been always burning since the world's been turning.
Yeah. This is taking a very musical turn all of a sudden. I'm trying to.
Do you think that song's about Thetans? We didn't start the fire. It was Xenu. Is that what that is?
I think it's. I mean, it would be absurd to not think that's what it's about.
Yeah. All right. Look. Here's the thing, and I think it will shock our listeners to hear it. So everybody, brace yourselves. I, Uncle Dan, am not perfect.
What?
Are you okay?
Balderdash.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have been known on occasion to get things wrong, and sometimes very wrong. And that's fine. We all get things wrong, but sometimes when I get things wrong, I end up hurting someone or many someones.
Oh.
That sucks.
What are we admitting to here, Dan?
What? I'm. This is.
Are you Dexter?
Just wait for it. It's going to be good. I promise. By the end, it's not. Anyway, It's about look. That feeling of hurting people because I fucked up in some way is about as bad a feeling as I know. And the thought that I hurt someone else, especially if it's someone that I love, which usually when you hurt somebody else, it's somebody that you love. Mm. But here's the thing about hurting someone you love. You have a built-in motivation to patch it up. You love them. You want them to feel better, and you want to keep living in relation to them. So in those cases, for most of us, it's relatively easy to make amends. You know, we can overcome the demands of our own egos and listen to the other person. We can apologize. We work solutions out. We commit to doing better in the future. But what about when it's not a loved one? What about when we get into a dust-up with an acquaintance or a stranger? Mm-hmm. What if we're wrong then? Will we be able to hear it? Will we make amends? I guess part of what brought this all up for me, and the reason that I wanted to talk about, arguing, and specifically arguing online, is that I've been seeing a lot of people getting very upset on social media of late over things like Black Lives Matter, wearing masks to stop the spread of coronavirus, etc. And, one person makes a statement, a few people agree, and then somebody disagrees, and the battle launches. And look, it's nothing new. We're all used to seeing arguments and trolling on the internet, but these issues feel a lot more important to people than just, standard politics or religion or, who was the best James Bond. It was Woody Allen, by the way. He actually did play with James Bond in the original Casino
movie
Royale.
called Casino Royale.
Yeah. Uncle Mark, have you ever seen Casino Royale?
Oh, of course I've seen that Casino Royale with
oh my God.
With Orson Welles and Peter Sellers.
It's got so many, but like the just the visual elements of it are astounding.
It's a bananas movie.
I thought of you the whole time I was watching it. Anyway, the issues that we're talking about now, these Black Lives Matter issues, coronavirus, all that stuff, they have literally life and death consequences for many people. So the stakes are super high right now.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about how to have these conversations, what works, what doesn't, what our goals are when we have them, that sort of thing. The thing I wanted to talk about is what I'm calling the art of not war. Eloquent, I know. It's Sun Tzu, only backwards.
You have to say it like Seb Gorka. The art of not war.
Gorka! Anyway, look, I think one of the problems that we have, and we've talked about this on the show a bit before, is that most of the confrontations we see on the internet forums take useless shapes. They're not designed to convince any human of anything. The best case scenario is just of frustrated people agreeing to disagree. The worst case scenario is anger, hurt, name-calling, vitriol, and even like threats of violence. So we're at the height of what is known as call-out culture, which is all about telling someone how wrong they are. Now, that's actually very important. One of the tools we have to fight things like racism is for people to realize that they will not be respected or treated well when they display hateful or socially unacceptable views or behaviors. At very least, people will think twice about their ignorant public and about their ignorance in public. And fewer people will either will be influenced or hurt by their bullshit. That's all good. But what won't happen is almost certainly, if someone is just jumped on when they make a statement, is a change of heart. So, sure, they might not say that type of thing in that forum again, but that doesn't mean that they've accepted that they were wrong. That just means that they've been silenced. And to me, that means that the people who disagree with them might have missed an opportunity. Because here's the thing. Back in, say, the George W. Bush era, the racists of our country were a lot quieter. They didn't speak their racism with impunity the way they have since Trump came along. But they were there. It's not like they were allies to black, indigenous people and people of color. They just knew that their views couldn't be spoken to in certain company. Now, for many of these people, silencing them is the best we can hope for. They're too far up their own assholes to hear from anything from anyone who disagrees with them. But there are some who could be turned from the dark side. There's still good in them. I can feel it. So let's talk about what that might entail. Now, the first hurdle that I think we need to jump through when we want to do more than just shut people up is realize that no matter how much we want this not to be true, having the best argument doesn't mean you win. It's
rarely does it mean that
rare.
anymore. Yeah, it you're absolutely right. Like it seems counterintuitive, but how you argue, especially on social media platforms, is literally more important than what you're arguing. The point you're making.
100%.
Yeah, which is crazy.
It's so vanishingly rare that someone changes their opinion on something that's important to them just because they hear a series of premises that lead to a sound conclusion. That's because these conversations are not about ideas. As much as we think they are or want to think they are about identity. 99% of the time, when you tell someone that they're wrong, meaning that they're incorrect about facts involved, what they hear is, you are wrong. Not your facts are wrong, but you, as a person, are wrong. You're unworthy. You're fucked up. You're bad. So it's really hard for our fragile little egos to stomach being incorrect about facts, but it's almost impossible to get over the blow of feeling like our identity is under assault. And that's the problem. These questions almost immediately become matters of whether or not each person's identity is acceptable. So, boom, suddenly you're in a war. Everyone dives to defend and attack. For instance, a post on Facebook about Black lives and, how they matter. Mm-hmm. It mentions the topic of white privilege. Now, we three woke-ass uncles feel like we have listened to arguments about the subject and are quite convinced that white privilege is a very real and very much something that we have greatly benefited from at the expense of non-white folks. But white guy X on Facebook feels the need to pipe up. He says, black people have their own TV stations. They have their own movies. They have their own books.
They have their own TV stations. Amazing.
I'm taking this from a very real example. So,
oh, my God.
So they're the ones who are privileged. Oh. Meanwhile, you'll hear a lot of people say, I was raised poor. I've struggled my whole life. How could I be privileged? Mm-hmm. And then the internet collapses on them and they are destroyed. The point here is that what we're dealing with is a person who feels attacked. Not their ideas feel attacked; they feel attacked. The human being feels attacked. It's just, and this happens on our side too. This isn't just us attacking them; they attack us. You know what I mean? And it's just as real as when someone says trans women aren't women. Mm-hmm. That's attacking their identity. You may think that you're just talking about someone, about ideas, but we don't have the luxury. If you want to actually communicate with another person, we do not have the luxury of thinking that we can just separate ideas from emotions, from who we are, because that's not how humans work. So, I think the best thing to do in these cases, if your goal, and again, this isn't always the goal, but if your goal is to actually find a human connection that might result in new thinking, different thinking, baby steps forward, I just think there are a few steps that we can take that would actually make a difference and that have, and I'll talk about sort of an experience that I had in just a minute. One of the things that I always like to say is that the best thing to do to convince someone else of your position is listen to them. As much as possible, don't lecture them, ask them questions. Let them know that you're not there to attack them, you just want to understand where they're coming from. And in doing that, you force them to sort of. You're not attacking, but you're making sure that they are aware of what they're trying to what they're actually saying, because so often.
Let me go ahead, Dan.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to back up a little bit more and just say, before because I think there are, and we'll talk about them, these tried and true practices that in just normal face-to-face conversation are good tactics to reach a conclusion, but are even more necessary when you're not actually looking at somebody's face. Your normal empathy triggers are not there. All you're seeing is words on a computer screen, whereas we are programmed to take cues from other people's expressions. And that's how we can understand, I just hurt their feelings, or I'm making a good point and I can tell they're listening, or, this person is frothing at the mouth and I don't want to have anything to do with them anymore.
I can make a judgment about whether this person is either too young to maybe have the depth of knowledge I do, or, is a vulnerable person of some kind who's just been fed some garbage. And I should be gentle about this, right?
So, but I would even back up a little bit further than that. And just before we go down that path, and this is kind of a point you made earlier, Dan, is what is your purpose? Why are you on social media? And I for one, I've abandoned Facebook for reasons we'll talk about. I mean, I still have a profile, and all thanks to our listener who set up the Facebook page for us for the How to Heretic. But I had to kind of excise Facebook from my life because it was not just a net negative; it was a net huge negative. I was having flame wars with friends and family. I was doing nothing but hurting feelings and having my feelings hurt. Nobody was improving, and I've tried to downplay. It's really hard not to have social media in your life at all. But can anyone argue? And I would ask both of you this: has social media been a net benefit or a net negative to our species?
I think that's hard to quantify because I see a lot of both that can come of it. Yeah. I know that a lot of people don't see a lot of the benefit that comes from it, but I see a lot of the benefit.
I see benefit, but I don't know that, I don't personally believe it's outweighed by the negative. If we could take social media away, and I know we can't, but if we could excise it from our world, we would lose certain things, forms of communication and community. But what it's shown is that it's given very bad people a lot more space, right? You could go to a coffee shop and meet with other people who have good, virtuous causes. You couldn't really do that if you were a Nazi. But what social media has given you is that forum. And
I'd say, Doug, it's to me, it's I think you're kind of both right that there is the good it does is incredibly good for people who have no social network for whatever reason. In real, in person,
or for those of us who just hate the people that we know.
It's a huge lifeline, right, for people who are disabled and people, kind of stuck in and kind of behind enemy lines, like a lot of us who were raised in religious, highly religious households were. I didn't have it as a kid. I don't know how it would have been for me as a kid, but anyway. But you're right that you don't know who the fuck you're really talking to out there, or who the fuck is really paying attention to what you're saying. I would just say, I'll just admit I'm not a Facebook person. I've never been on Facebook.
Yeah. So, but I would just say before we go down this path, what is the purpose of you getting into a discussion on social media? Why are you doing it? And that might be your first place to to take an off ramp, because it's very difficult, as we'll discuss, to convince someone of a different point of view via social media, and more often than not, it ends badly. Like Andy Richter said, trying to fight an internet troll is like trying to drown a vampire in your own blood. Right. This is most people who are that are on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram to fight are there. They don't want to be convinced. They don't want to learn. They just want to obliterate. They want to pwn somebody.
Right.
So just that's laying that marker down. Why are you doing it? And if you
absolutely
you want to try and move the needle, then.
Right. So yeah, because all of that being said, negativity, granted, in terms of like the world of social media, it's not going away anytime soon.
Nope.
And many of us like it, want it, and want to be able to live in that space happily. But, most of us, people like me, the three of us are not going to just let, if somebody posts something racist, we're not going to let it stand. We're not just, going to say nothing.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you approach or something like that? Or if someone, if someone's posting some bullshit about how, don't wear masks because people can't breathe in them and their oxygen level goes down and, bacteria kills you or whatever. I personally can't let that sort of thing stand. So the question is, how do we go? And, I've been very careful for most of my Facebook. I don't let just anybody be my Facebook friend. I'm very careful about, I have to have met them in person and had some interaction for almost exclusively. So these are people that I usually care about. So I want this to go well. So I think, starting with what I said before, which was, don't lecture them, ask questions. That's a good way. That's a good way to start. I mean, hopefully, if they're your friends on Facebook, you've established some level of rapport, of trust, to some extent. Mm-hmm. That doesn't always work, but hopefully. I think one of the most powerful things you can do if you want others to hear you and listen to you is admit when they have a good point. When you and really look for ways that they're right, because there's nothing that's more that leads to more trust than when you are willing to do what you're asking of them. You know what I mean? So I'd say even go as far as to look for ways that you can adjust your perspective based on good points that they have, because their overarching point might be wrong. And it might be very deleterious to other people, but in the course of your discussion, they may have they may have good points. So I look for those because it's such a wonderful, powerful tool.
Yeah, I've done the same thing. It's very disarming if it definitely makes people feel heard.
Right.
And people feeling heard is incredibly important.
It's so powerful and so important because, you're asking them to hear you. So it's the only way that's going to work is if they trust that you're going to hear them as well.
Yeah.
So there are other things. I think that's a good place to start. But I think that also we need to remember that we can have bad ideas too. Just because we're woke as fuck doesn't mean that we can't be wrong. Like, I had to learn a lot of stuff before I understood why Black Lives Matter is good, and I was raised white in Utah. I had racism in me, sort of. It was just implanted there by providence.
Right.
It wasn't taught to me or whatever. It was just part of how I came up.
As you pass through your 20s and 30s, you probably were like a lot of us were very convinced of yourself that I'm not a racist. Like,
right.
Because here's the thing. I am definitely, relative to my parents and my church, I am definitely not racist, right?
Right.
But that doesn't mean I'm not a racist. It just means I'm a little closer to the good end of things on the continuum, and it's a journey.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And so each step along the way that I have come in getting a little bit less racist has required me to confront myself about things that made me very, very uncomfortable. And especially for white people in this country, especially for men and straight people and cis people in this country, there's, as a straight white man, I get to feel comfortable a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think there's this sense that if something is making me uncomfortable, there's this subconscious thing that happens where I insist and I suddenly jump to, well, this must be wrong because of how uncomfortable it makes me feel about me. Mm. And that's a totally natural thing to have happen. What we need to realize is our level of comfort is getting in the way of us actually hearing people. Mm. And it's getting in the way of good cognition. So if we, as skeptics and free thinkers, are going to actually live up to those ideals of healthy skepticism and good free thought, we're going to have to take some steps. And I think a lot of those steps are to do with learning how to separate our beliefs from our sense of who we are, so that we're not, so that we can be less defensive and more curious when it comes to someone challenging our beliefs. So that when I was in high school, I remember one time thinking, I remember me having the thought, oh, black people are more racist than white people, because I was in high school and somebody yelled, I hate white people. And I thought, well, I've never heard anyone overtly yell, I hate black people in this hallway, so obviously I'm the oppressed one. Well, I've since learned a lot. But, that really challenged my sense of who I was.
That's me. That was my fault. I shouldn't have yelled that.
I honestly think you shouldn't have, but that's okay.
I have blood sugar problems, and I would like to take a mulligan on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to get to one story that I encountered recently, in which a friend of mine had posted a post about on Facebook. And this is not a guy I know well, but it is a guy who, over the years, we have sort of, and we disagree on so many points. He leans much more right-wing than I do, than left-wing, which is a huge point of disagreement. He posts things from fucking Prager University and Jordan Peterson and stuff sometimes. However, he really does try to see, when he's called out gently, he really does work to try and understand things. So he posted a thing about how he was sad to see all of these, Confederate monuments being torn down because it's, we're losing our history or whatever.
Right.
And I made on that thing some of the points that we talked about in your segment, Uncle Mark, about the same thing. About
Brigham Young statue.
This isn't how we mark history. This isn't how we remember history. This is just who we venerate.
Yeah.
And these guys aren't worthy of that veneration.
Right.
And it hurts people. And the thing is that because we had built up a trusting rapport over the years, and because we had listened to each other a lot, he didn't make any comment on that thread then. But he texted me weeks later, like a week and a half later, and said, hey, I think I'm coming around to your way of thinking on that. Which I think is amazing, and I'm just holding that out as proof that it can happen. And so I gloated a lot in the text back to him.
Do you want to name him? Let's shame him. Let's dox that motherfucker.
Right? Here's his address. Let me look that up.
Well, I think that's great, and it's important. And there are examples of that having, you're not the only one, but you're a more rare occurrence. And it takes a tremendous amount of patience and a tremendous amount of self-control. And, I like to consider myself, so quote unquote woke, but I know that I have miles and miles to go. Mm. But why I would consider myself on the end of the spectrum that I'm happier about is because I'm willing to do that. You can challenge my beliefs. You can ask me to explain myself or make my argument, and I'll do it. And at the end of that process, if I have a different conclusion, then that's growth and that's good. But what's that?
Well, I want to underscore that and just say that, look, because I see where you're going, I think, which is that you're going to say something about most people aren't there. But let me tell you something. Leading by example is the best thing you can do.
Truly. But
be that person. Be okay with changing your mind.
But I would say
that's a hero.
It is incumbent on us as people who are trying to be woke, if not there yet, that and I know that's a very overused term, but I think everyone understands what I'm trying to say.
You could say enlightened. That's
enlightened. Thank you. Is that we've made this decision internally that we're going to be willing to change, and so we have to have the patience. It's not very often that somebody's saying, all lives matter, or saying, taking down Confederate monuments is erasing our history. These people haven't made that decision yet. So, we're the ones who have to be patient. We're the ones who have to be, and it's a fucking burden because sometimes you just want to yell.
In the skeptical community, we've been used to that our whole lives, especially if we're raised around religion. I mean, I'm a queer person. My right to draw breath is questioned on a constant basis by people on social media, right?
Yeah,
totally.
And so I would just say, look, Dan, I take every point you're making, and I think they're all excellent. It is predicated on a couple things. One is knowing if the person on the other end of the conversation is an honest broker. And
absolutely.
You'll know that better on Facebook with these Facebook friends / relationships you have than I will say on Twitter, where arguments are fortune cookie length, and you don't know who you're really talking to on the other end necessarily. And they're just shitty people that want to be trolls and start fights, right?
Yeah, and I think you should only continue in these endeavors if you are convinced that the other person is operating in good faith.
But
I think that's vital.
I will tell you too that because I do the emails for the show as well.
Right.
There have been several examples where people write in and apparently we get things wrong once in a while. What the fuck is with that? I mean, you guys. And so people will write in once in a while, and sometimes they're very, very cool. A guy just wrote in recently about an issue about polyamory, and I won't go into it, but felt like we kind of got something wrong many, 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 many shows ago when we were talking about polygamy. Huh. And he was completely right. And he was very nice about it. And I said, absolutely, you know what? You're correct. We'll do better. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. And there's times that people have written in angrily, and somebody wrote in angrily about another issue, and I won't say what it was. And I think we had gotten something wrong, but certainly that was not the intent. And so they wrote this really red hot email and just said, don't ever fucking talk about that again. How dare you? Right. So I wrote back and said, well, hey, that's not very fair. You should, if you've listened to the show, our hearts. We're not out to cause harm to good people, right?
Just shitty people.
Yeah, just shitty people and shitty ideas. So tell me what we got wrong, and we ended up in this really positive dialogue, and I think they came to the conclusion that there was no ill intent, and I made guarantees to them that we will make a concerted effort to do better on that particular subject. And that was those have been very positive conversations, and the email's a little bit different than social media, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a valid point. We should consider the fact you need to consider the venue, because you're right. You're not going to be able to have this kind of long form discussion that leads to like profitable discourse on Twitter. You're just not going to be able to.
Yeah, and Grindr. I've tried it. It's really tough.
Right.
Yeah.
So probably disengage is the best thing to do there, or just shame people. I don't know. Do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about the fact that it might be possible to have good discourse even online, because I know a lot of people don't believe in it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all. I don't know.
We'll try. We licked it, guys.
We fixed it. It's all better now.
Nice. Well, at Dan on Twitter and Facebook, and
yell
at him why he's wrong about this.
If you can find me, get me.
That's right. All right. Well, cool. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on.
Well, friends, that is it for this week's Barn Burner of a show.
Hey, we we'd love to hear from you guys. Send us an email at howto@howtoheretic.com.
Or if you're Michael Eric, you can leave a message for Doug at 903-88-HOW-TO, which is 903-884-6986. You can at me on Twitter, and I'll at him, because that was cruel bullshit.
And thanks to our patrons and even Michael Eric for letting me pound him in the head.
Thanks to Cody Layton for editing the show.
And thanks to you, dear friends, for tuning in. We sure appreciate you.
Bye, friends.
Bye.